The Starhawk moved through the black sea of space, its silver hull catching faint light from distant stars. The sound inside was only the hum of the engines and the occasional click of consoles. In the middle of the ship's bridge sat Ethan Cole, a human officer, his uniform neat, his eyes calm. He spoke only when needed, never raising his voice. Most of the alien crew barely noticed him. To them he was just another officer, another set of hands on the ship's many controls. Ethan had been on the Starhawk for months, always doing his job without mistake. He never joined the loud meals in the mess hall, never told long stories like the others. When off duty, he sat alone in the observation deck, watching the stars in silence. The alien crew thought this was simply his human nature. They did not know the real reason. Far away from the noise of the galaxy, Ethan kept his past hidden. Locked deep behind quiet eyes and a steady voice, the galaxy was at war. The craft dominion had been spreading like a dark tide, taking systems one after another, enslaving those who resisted. The Allied fleet, a mix of many alien races, was fighting to stop them. Humans were newcomers in this grand war, but they had quickly proven to be fierce fighters. Still, many aliens thought of humans as unpredictable, too emotional, and in need of guidance. Ethan did nothing to change that view. In fact, he seemed to encourage it by staying quiet. Sometimes, whispers passed among the crew when they thought Ethan could not hear. They said he had fought on the ground before joining the fleet, that he had survived battles where no one else did. Some claimed he had seen whole cities burn and kept walking. But these were only stories with no proof. What was true was that Ethan had skills. His console work was precise, his targeting perfect, and he seemed to know enemy tactics before they even happened. But no one dared to ask him how he knew. The ship's commander, an alien with smooth silver skin named Leah Varan, noticed him often. She saw the way he kept his posture even in long shifts, the way his eyes flickered over every detail on the screens. She had considered asking about his past, but in the military, you learned quickly that some files were locked for a reason. And Ethan Cole's file was locked tighter than most. The Starhawk itself was a symbol of power, one of the largest battleships in the Allied fleet. Its hull carried heavy plasma cannons, missile arrays, and railguns that could tear apart cruisers. Yet in the heart of all that steel and firepower sat one quiet human, who never spoke of himself. The aliens who served on the bridge often forgot he was even there until he spoke. And when he did, everyone listened. His words were simple, his tone steady, but there was weight in them, a weight that made others follow his instructions without question. In the quiet hours of the night cycle, Ethan walked the empty corridors. Alone, the lights dimmed, his boots making soft echoes. He sometimes stopped by the training deck, where unused combat drones waited in the dark. His hand would hover over the activation switch, then he would pull away, as if deciding it was better not to remember certain skills. The craft dominion's shadow loomed larger every week. News came in of more worlds falling, and the Allied fleet prepared for another mission. The crew of the Starhawk trained harder, their laughter and voices filling the ship. Ethan joined the exercises without complaint, his movements smooth, efficient, never wasting a second. During these drills, some aliens noticed something unsettling. Ethan never missed, not once, no matter how fast or unpredictable the target. His calm face never changed, even when alarms blared. Still, to most, he was just the quiet human, a man who followed orders and did his duty, nothing more. Only a few guessed that there might be a storm hidden beneath that calm surface. A storm that, if unleashed, could change the course of a battle. Ethan himself gave no sign of what he carried inside. No hint of the truth stored away in restricted files deep within the Allied fleet's archives. Far away, in those encrypted records, was the story of what Ethan Cole had done before he ever set foot on the Starhawk. But for now, on the ship's bridge, under the cold light of alien stars, he was just another officer at his console, waiting for the next mission to begin. Waiting for the day when silence would no longer be enough, and the galaxy would see the man it had tried so hard to forget. The call to assemble came through the ship's comm system, a sharp tone followed by the captain's voice. The Starhawks. Crew hurried to their posts. The wide bridge lit up with tactical displays, showing red markers across the star map. Craft ships, dozens of them, were moving toward a neutral colony in the outer systems. The colony had no defenses, no fleet, just small transports and farming stations. If the craft reached them, it would be another massacre added to the long list in this war. Ethan took his seat at the tactical console without a word, his eyes fixed on the shifting formation of enemy ships on the display. Commander Leah Varin stood at the center of the bridge, her silver skin catching the glow from the screens. She spoke to the crew in a firm voice, explaining that the Allied fleet would intercept the craft before they reached the colony. Her tone was steady, but there was no hiding the tension in her eyes. As the crew began running calculations, Leah asked for attack route suggestions. Several alien officers presented cautious plans, all focused on holding the line far from the colony. Ethan remained silent at first, his hands moving quickly over the console, scanning enemy movement data. After a moment, he spoke in his calm voice, offering a plan that was unlike the others. Instead of holding the line, he suggested the fleet split into two groups, with the Starhawk drawing the craft into a narrow asteroid field. Once inside, the fleet could trap them and strike from both sides. Some officers looked at him like he was reckless. The asteroid field was dangerous for big ships. One wrong move and a hull could tear open, but Ethan's tone didn't change. He explained that the craft formation had gaps they didn't realize. He had seen this same maneuver in a past battle, and it had ended with the enemy in pieces. His voice held no bragging, no excitement, just certainty, as though the outcome was already decided. Commander Leah studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. The plan was risky, but his numbers matched perfectly. She could see he had already calculated every firing arc, every possible escape route. In the end, she approved it. Ordering the fleet to prepare for the split, the crew worked fast, sending encrypted signals to Allied ships nearby. Coordinates for the trap were set. On the bridge, some aliens exchanged glances, wondering why this human was so confident in something that could go so wrong. Ethan ignored the looks, focusing entirely on the shifting lines of the star map. In the hangars, fighter pilots readied their craft. Engineers checked the Starhawk's heavy weapons. The air in the ship buzzed with the hum of systems powering up. In the mess hall, whispers spread quickly. The human officer had convinced the commander to take the fleet into an asteroid field. Some thought he was brilliant. Others thought he was mad. The Allied fleet moved into position, the cold light from distant suns flashing across their armor, dozens of warships turning in precise formation. The craft ships continued their march toward the colony, unaware of the trap ahead. Ethan's console blinked with live data from recon drones. The craft were moving exactly as he predicted, each marker on the screen falling into the pattern he had expected. His jaw stayed still, but deep in his mind, pieces of old battles came back to him. Not just numbers and formations, but the feel of the air before the first shots, the way the enemy always thought they were in control, right before they lost everything. Commander Leah came to stand beside his station, her voice low so others wouldn't hear. She asked him if he had done this before. His eyes flicked to her for just a second, then back to the screen. He said only one word: once. The way he said it made her believe there was more to the story. But now wasn't the time to ask. As the fleet approached the edge of the asteroid field, the stars beyond seemed sharper, colder. The ship's shields hummed to life, every crew member strapped in. Weapons crews loaded plasma rounds, missile tubes slid into place. In the quiet before the first shot, Ethan's fingers rested on the controls, steady and sure. He spoke only to confirm targeting parameters. The Starhawk's engines shifted pitch, pushing it forward into the field. Jagged rocks the size of cities drifted around them, their shadows passing over the hull. The rest of the fleet followed, Sliding into the positions Ethan had marked earlier, it was dangerous, yes, but every move was exact. Nothing wasted. Out in the dark, the craft ships began to accelerate. Thinking the human-led fleet was running, the bait had been taken. In a matter of minutes, they would be inside the trap, and Ethan Cole would be ready to show them why this plan was not just a theory, but a memory he had lived before, one that had ended in complete destruction for the enemy, though no one on the Starhawk yet knew what that truly meant. The days before the mission were filled with drills. The Starhawk moved through the asteroid field at different angles, practicing sharp turns and sudden stops. The crew learned to fire weapons while dodging massive rocks drifting in the void. Ethan Cole worked silently at his console during these runs, his eyes sharp, catching every mistake. He gave short corrections to the gunnery crews, never shouting, never losing his calm. Some aliens thought he was cold, others thought he was just too focused to waste words. It was during one of these training runs that the first real signs appeared, signs that Ethan was not like the others. The Starhawk simulated battle began. Multiple enemy drones launched from the hangars to act as craft ships, their patterns unpredictable, fast and aggressive. The crew worked as a team to destroy them, but Ethan took over targeting halfway through, his fingers moving faster than most could follow. One by one, the drones exploded in clean, precise shots, not a single miss, and all within seconds of appearing on the sensors. The bridge grew quiet as it happened, only the sound of his targeting. Computer locking onto another drone, then another, and then silence as the last one vanished in a burst of light. Commander Leah Varon stood behind him, watching carefully. She had seen skilled officers before, but there was something different about this human. It wasn't just skill. It was as if he already knew where the enemy would move before they did. Down in the lower decks, an old alien engineer named Tarvek noticed too. He had fought in many battles during his long life, and the way Ethan destroyed those drones reminded him of a story whispered in military circles. A story of a battle where an entire craft armada vanished in one night. No survivors, only wreckage left floating in the cold dark. That battle had been blamed on an unnamed human officer, one whose identity was hidden by the high command. Tarvik began to wonder if the quiet man on the Starhawk could be that same human. Tarvik didn't keep his thoughts to himself for long. In the mess hall that night, he leaned across the table to a fellow engineer and whispered, "Watch that one," nodding toward Ethan as he sat alone with his meal. "If he is who I think he is, then we're not sailing with an officer. We're sailing with a weapon," the other engineer frowned, thinking it was just an old soldier's exaggeration, but the words stuck in his mind. Over the next few days, more of the crew began to notice little things. Ethan's ability to read battle data faster than anyone else, the way he always sat in the same position, his eyes never leaving the screens even when alarms blared. During one simulation, a young alien gunner froze under pressure, unsure which target to fire at first. Ethan calmly reached over, adjusted the controls, and destroyed both incoming drones with 2 perfect shots. Then he said only, "Next time, breathe before you aim," and went back to his station. By now, curiosity about his past was spreading. A few crew members tried searching the fleet's database for Ethan Cole's service record, but found only a short file with most of it blacked out under classified clearance. No list of battles, no history before his current posting. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. This only made the whispers grow louder. One evening, Commander Leah called Ethan to her private ready room. The stars outside glowed faintly through the large viewport. She asked him directly about his history in the war. His eyes stayed calm as he replied that he had served where he was needed, nothing more. His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Leah didn't push, but her suspicion deepened. She was starting to believe the quiet human sitting at her tactical console was far more dangerous than he appeared. In the hangars, fighter pilots began betting on how many kills Ethan could score in the real battle. The numbers ranged from 20 to 50. Some laughed about it, thinking it was a game. But a few who had been on the bridge during drills didn't laugh at all. They had seen the precision in his eyes, the way his hands never hesitated. They didn't think he was guessing. They thought he had already lived this kind of fight many times before. The truth was, Ethan was keeping his mind locked on the mission, but deep inside, old memories stirred, images of burning skies, the sound of ships tearing apart, the brief flashes of faces he had known and lost. He had seen war at its worst, and he had learned that victory wasn't about glory. It was about ending the threat as fast and as completely as possible. The craft were coming, and he would make sure they didn't leave the asteroid field alive. By the end of the week, the Starhawk was ready, the crew sharper, the formation perfect, yet the tension in the air was heavier than before. They were heading into a trap of their own making, but for many, the real mystery was the human who had designed it, a man with no visible fear, whose eyes saw the enemy like pieces on a board, waiting to be removed. None of them yet knew that the kill count he carried in silence was unlike anything the galaxy had ever recorded, and soon the craft would learn that truth the hard way. The craft fleet appeared on the long-range scanners like a swarm of red lights, moving fast, their formation wide and aggressive. The Allied ships around the Starhawk adjusted their course, splitting into two groups just as the plan demanded. Commander Leah stood at the center of the bridge, giving clear orders, her voice firm but steady. The crew moved with sharp precision, but there was a silent awareness in the air. Everyone knew they were about to gamble their lives on the human strategy. Ethan sat at the tactical station, his eyes fixed on the shifting patterns of the enemy, his hands resting lightly on the controls. He didn't speak unless it was necessary. When he did, it was only to call out slight adjustments, small changes to the firing arcs, corrections to the fighter launch sequence. The crew followed each instruction instantly. None of them even thought about questioning him now. The asteroid field loomed ahead, huge rocks drifting in slow, silent motion, some as big as cities, others small enough to pass unnoticed. Shadows moved across the hull as the Starhawk slipped deeper inside. The craft ships followed, thinking they were chasing a retreating enemy, their confidence making them blind to the trap they were walking into. On the bridge, the lights dimmed to combat red, alarms pulsed softly, weapons charged, shield generators roared to full power, fighter squadrons launched from the hangars, streaking ahead to harass the craft vanguard. The first exchange of fire lit up the dark, flashes of plasma beams cutting through space, explosions blooming in slow motion against the void. Ethan's voice came over the comms, calm and precise, telling the gunnery crews where to aim, calling out target numbers before the enemy ships even moved into position. It was uncanny, like he could see seconds into the future, one by one. Craft frigates exploded under the Starhawk's guns, each hit clean and devastating. There were no wasted shots, no panicked bursts of fire, only controlled destruction. The craft tried to press forward, but as they advanced, they entered the narrow pockets of the asteroid field, their ships losing maneuvering space. Allied ships moved into position on the far side, sealing the exit. It was exactly the trap Ethan had described days earlier. Now it was closing. On one flank, a craft destroyer turned to break out. Ethan switched targeting instantly, launching a spread of torpedoes that curved around a drifting asteroid and struck the destroyer's engines. The ship spun out of control, smashing into a smaller cruiser. The collision erupted in fire and fragments, sending debris scattering through the field. Leah watched Ethan work, the way his eyes never left the tactical display, the way he spoke only when needed. She realized he wasn't guessing at enemy movement. He was predicting it with the kind of certainty that only came from experience. But what kind of experience could give someone this level of control over a battle? She didn't ask, not now. The bridge shook as enemy fire hit the Starhawk's shields. Crew members gripped their stations, sparks falling from an overloaded console. Ethan didn't flinch, his voice cutting through the noise. Return fire. Section 3, targeting relay 7, within seconds. Another Krath cruiser was nothing but wreckage. Fighters darted between the asteroids, weaving through dangerous gaps, chasing enemy interceptors. Allied bombers used the cover of rocks to get close enough to launch heavy payloads. The Krath fleet was beginning to falter, their formation breaking under the relentless precision of the trap. Ethan shifted the fleet's formation again, pushing the Krath deeper into the most dangerous part of the field, where asteroid fragments moved unpredictably. Here, their shields were constantly stressed, and their weapons couldn't track as effectively. He used the environment like another weapon, turning every rock into a possible kill. Down in the hangars, pilots listened to his orders with an almost superstitious trust. It was as if he knew exactly when and where the enemy would make a mistake. And every time he predicted it, the result was another burning ship left behind in the dark on the enemy. Flagship, Krath commanders barked orders in panic, their voices sharp and urgent. They realized too late that they weren't hunting the humans. The humans had been hunting them. Minutes stretched like hours as the battle raged, but slowly, the outcome became clear. Enemy numbers thinned, their escape routes vanished. The asteroids around them littered with the twisted remains of their own fleet. The final push came when Ethan called for all ships to converge on the flagship, heavy cannons and missile salvos tearing through its armor. One last flash lit up the asteroid field as the massive vessel broke apart, scattering flaming debris into the void. The bridge of the Starhawk went quiet except for the hum of systems powering down. The Krath fleet was gone, destroyed almost completely. The trap had worked perfectly, but for the crew, there was something more unsettling than the victory. They had just seen what Ethan Cole could do when the fight was real, and they couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a fraction of what he was capable of. In the silence that followed, Leah looked at Ethan, his expression unchanged, his hands resting calmly on the console, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the battle, one truth was becoming clear. Whatever his past was, it was forged in battles far more brutal than this, and the Krath were only beginning to understand the kind of enemy they had awakened. The battle was over. The asteroid field was quiet again, except for drifting debris and the faint glow of wreckage. The Starhawk moved slowly through the remains, scanning for any signs of survivors or hidden ships. The crew worked in silence, still processing how clean and decisive the fight had been. Some exchanged quick glances toward the tactical station, where Ethan sat, his face calm, his hands resting lightly on the console, as if nothing had happened. In the captain's ready room, Commander Leah Varon stood beside the large table as a secure communication came through. The holographic seal of the Allied fleet's high command appeared. The message was encrypted at the highest level, visible only to those with special clearance. The voice on the other end was clipped and formal, ordering her to bring Ethan Cole to a private briefing immediately. No other crew were to be present. Moments later, Ethan entered the room, his posture steady, his expression unreadable. The door slid shut behind him. Leah turned the screen toward him so he could see the authorization code. The High Command's representative spoke directly to him now, confirming his identity and stating that his classified record was being temporarily unlocked for the mission. Commander, Leah listened as the file loaded, her eyes narrowing slightly as page after page of restricted data appeared. What she read made her pause. It was not a normal service record. It was a list, long and chilling. Every confirmed kill Ethan Cole had made in his military career. The numbers were exact, the details precise. There were ground battles where hundreds of enemy troops had fallen in a single engagement under his command. Space battles where entire enemy squadrons had been wiped out. Each entry with timestamps and combat reports. The total was staggering. Over 12,000 confirmed kills across multiple campaigns. Leah had seen impressive numbers before, but nothing close to this. She looked up at Ethan, searching for some sign of pride or regret, but he stood there silently, his eyes steady, as if these numbers meant nothing to him now. The High Command's voice continued, explaining that his history had been kept secret to avoid political backlash, enemy propaganda, and fear among allies. Only the highest-ranking officers knew who he really was. When the call ended, Leah sat back in her chair, the room heavy with silence. She asked him why he never told anyone. Ethan's answer was simple. "It doesn't change what needs to be done." He spoke without emotion, but she could sense the weight behind the words. Outside the ready room, rumors were already spreading. The crew who had fought alongside Ethan in the battle were talking. The precision of his shots, the way he seemed to control the entire fight. Whispers turned into theories, and theories turned into bold claims. Some said he had been part of the infamous Black Drop operations. Others swore he was the one responsible for the destruction of the Krath's Fourth Fleet years ago. That night, in the dim light of the mess hall, the whispers grew louder. Crew members from other Allied ships who had seen the battle footage began passing it around. Freeze-framing shots of Ethan at the console, calm as enemy ships exploded one after another. It wasn't long before someone claimed they had overheard the number, 12,000 kills, and once that rumor escaped, it spread through the fleet like fire. By the next morning, the entire Allied network was buzzing. Krath spies caught the rumor as well, feeding it up their chain of command. Within hours, enemy intelligence was running reports on a human officer with a kill count so high it seemed impossible. They gave him a name in their own language, one that roughly translated to the Executioner. On the bridge of the Starhawk, the atmosphere had shifted. Alien crew members looked at Ethan differently now, with a mix of awe and caution. Some kept their distance. Others watched him more closely. It wasn't fear of him attacking them. It was the realization that they were working beside someone who could turn the tide of a war almost single-handedly. Ethan himself did nothing to acknowledge the change. He ran system checks, reviewed fleet reports, and prepared for the next mission just as he always had. But he could feel the eyes on him. He knew the secret would not stay quiet now. Once the enemy was aware, the entire war would change. They would either try to destroy him or avoid him entirely, and both outcomes had their own dangers. Later, as Leah stood beside him on the bridge, she spoke quietly, telling him that his secret was no longer his alone. The galaxy now knew who he was. Ethan gave a slight nod, his voice low when he answered. Then the galaxy will know what comes next. It wasn't a threat, but it carried the weight of someone who had already decided what he would do, and that was far more unsettling than any open warning. The news spread faster than anyone could control. It was not an official announcement, but in wartime, rumors were often more powerful than truth. Within days, every corner of the Allied fleet had heard the story. The human officer on the Starhawk, Ethan Cole, was said to have the highest confirmed kill count in recorded history, 12,000 enemies dead by his command or his own hand. Some believed it, some thought it was an exaggeration, but all agreed on one thing. They had seen him fight, and whatever the number was, it was terrifyingly high. From there, the rumor crossed into neutral space. Traitors and mercenaries whispered it over drinks in shadowy stations. Pirates who usually boasted of their own victories went silent when the subject came up. Even in far-off colonies untouched by the war, people spoke of the human with the cold eyes who could end fleets. The name Executioner began to stick, repeated by alien tongues with both fear and respect. It wasn't long before the Krath Dominion learned the truth. Their intelligence division confirmed the number, cross-checking battle records they had tried to hide. Not all kills could be tied directly to him, but enough were proven that they stopped doubting. The order went out across their fleets. If the Starhawk is sighted, proceed with extreme caution. Some commanders even interpreted that as avoid at all costs. The first real sign of this fear came during a patrol mission. The Starhawk entered a sector known for heavy enemy activity. Their sensors picked up a Krath strike group, 3 cruisers and 2 destroyers. Normally a force like that would attack immediately, but this time, the enemy ships turned and jumped to hyperspace without firing a single shot on the bridge. The crew stared at the empty space where the Krath had been. Some laughed in disbelief, others felt a chill. Commander Leia. Varen said nothing. But inside she knew the truth. They hadn't run from the fleet. They had run from him. Over the next weeks, similar encounters kept happening. The Starhawk would arrive at a contested system and find the Krath already retreating. Allied intelligence confirmed that intercepted enemy communications mentioned Target Cole as a priority threat. The very mention of his presence was enough to alter battle plans. Among the Allied forces, the reaction was mixed. Some commanders wanted to put him at the center of every operation, believing he could win the war faster. Others argued that making him so visible would only put him in greater danger. Assassins, sabotage, or even massive suicide attacks could be aimed directly at him. For the crew of the Starhawk, the change was strange. They were used to being part of a respected battleship. But now it was more than that. They were seen as the ship of the executioner. Other fleets treated them with an unusual mix of honor and caution. Young recruits wanted transfers to serve under him, hoping his skill would rub off on them, while others avoided assignment altogether, fearing the Starhawk would be the first target in any major assault. Ethan, as always, ignored the noise. He kept to his duties, reviewing maps, running drills, maintaining weapons readiness. He neither celebrated nor denied the stories. When crew members asked him directly if the number was true, he would only say, "It doesn't matter," and walk away. But the truth was, it did matter because the war itself was shifting. The Krath were becoming more careful. Their aggressive expansion slowed. They pulled back from some border systems, reinforcing others. It was as if they were reorganizing their entire strategy just to account for one man. High Command noticed this and began to plan new offensives, using the Starhawk and Ethan as a psychological weapon as much as a military one. They would leak his presence in advance to scare enemy fleets into retreat, saving lives and resources without a single shot. The plan worked several times, but Leia worried that it would not last. Fear was powerful, but it also made the enemy desperate. One night cycle. As the ship cruised through a quiet sector, Leia found Ethan on the observation deck, the stars reflecting. In his eyes, she told him about her concern, that the Krath might try something extreme to end the threat he posed. Ethan didn't look away from the stars when he answered. "Then we make sure their last attempt is their final one." His tone was calm, not boasting, simply stating a fact. She knew then that whatever came, he wouldn't run, he wouldn't hide. He had faced worse before. And that was why the galaxy feared him, because fear alone couldn't stop him. It only pushed him to finish what he started. And deep down, she understood that if the Krath truly came for him, it would not just be another battle. It would be the kind of fight that decided the course of the war. The trap was set with care. The Krath had learned from their mistakes. Instead of avoiding the Starhawk, they gathered a fleet large enough to crush it, hidden in a dense star cluster where scanning was difficult. They sent out false distress signals from a fake transport convoy, hoping to draw the Allied ship into the kill zone. To anyone else, it might have looked like a simple rescue mission, but to the Krath, it was a chance to end the executioner once and for all. The orders came through High Command. A nearby convoy had sent a distress call. Krath raiders were reported in the area. Commander Leia Varen read the details on her display. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but as the Starhawk closed in on the coordinates, she noticed small things that felt wrong. The signal strength was too perfect. The enemy signatures too scattered. She glanced toward Ethan, wondering if he saw the same pattern. He did. His eyes moved over the tactical map slowly, and then he spoke in that calm voice the crew had learned to trust. "This isn't a rescue. It's a net." There was no panic in his words, only certainty. Leia ordered the ship to battle stations immediately. The crew moved quickly, alarms echoing through the halls. Weapons powered up, shields came online. The Starhawk was ready, but the Krath were already moving. Out of the shadows of the star cluster, dozens of warships emerged, far more than the Farve crew had expected. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, and a massive flagship at the center. Their engines glowed like burning eyes in the dark. The Allied fleet was badly outnumbered, and for a moment, even the most seasoned officers on the bridge felt a flicker of fear. Ethan didn't. His hands were already moving over the console, plotting vectors, marking enemy weak points, giving orders to reposition the Allied escorts. He told the fighter wings to hold back until the craft were committed to the attack. It was a risk, but it would keep the fighters alive long enough to strike when it mattered most. The first wave of craft ships came in hard, their cannons lighting up the dark. The Starhawk's shields flared under the impact. The ship shook, but the return fire was immediate and precise. Ethan called out targets in rapid sequence, each order leading to another enemy ship being torn apart. But still they came, wave after wave. Then Ethan did something unexpected. He ordered the Starhawk to push forward toward the craft flagship, straight into the center of their formation. Some officers hesitated, thinking it was suicide. But Leia trusted him and gave the command. The engines roared and the massive battleship surged ahead. Enemy ships firing from all sides. It was exactly what Ethan wanted. By drawing the craft in close, he forced them into each other's firing lines, their own ships becoming obstacles. The chaos gave the Allied escorts a chance to slip into flanking positions, cutting into the craft from the sides. When the fighters finally launched, they came in fast and low, weaving between enemy ships, targeting engines and weapon systems. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield. The craft formation began to break, but the flagship still loomed ahead, massive and heavily armored. It was the command center for the entire trap, and Ethan knew the battle wouldn't end until it was destroyed. He ordered all remaining torpedoes and heavy railgun rounds focused on one section of the flagship's hull. The concentrated firepower punched through, creating a glowing wound in the ship's side. Before the craft could recover, the Starhawk swung around, delivering a final barrage that ripped the flagship in half, a massive fireball expanding into the void. With their command destroyed, the craft fleet began to fall apart. Some tried to fight on, others fled. Ethan ordered the Allied ships to press the advantage, pushing the enemy back until nothing but wreckage and retreat signals remained on the bridge. The crew began to realize what had just happened. The craft had brought everything they could to kill him, and instead, he had turned their trap into their own defeat. The losses they suffered here would take years to recover from. Leia looked at Ethan, wanting to say something, but he was already back at his console, reviewing damage reports, checking for survivors. To him, it wasn't about glory. It was about making sure the fight was finished. When she finally spoke, she said quietly, "You know they'll never stop trying." He glanced at her, then back to his work. "Then we'll never stop winning." The crew didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The victory spoke for itself. They had faced the craft's deadliest plan and walked away stronger. And now the enemy knew that even when they came with everything, it still wasn't enough to bring down the human they feared most. The craft fleet's defeat in the star cluster sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News of the battle spread faster than any official report. The trap that was meant to end Ethan Cole had instead broken the craft's power in one devastating strike. In the following weeks, Allied scouts reported chaos in enemy territory. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines collapsing, and their commanders arguing among themselves. The Allied High Command wasted no time. They pushed forward with new offensives, retaking systems that had been under craft control for years. Worlds that had lived in fear saw Allied ships arrive instead of enemy patrols. Cheers and celebrations erupted on colonies once thought lost forever. Many credited the change to Ethan, though he never claimed it. On the Starhawk, life slowly returned to its routine, but the atmosphere was different. The crew walked with more confidence, their heads held higher. Other ships in the fleet saluted them with extra respect when they passed. Yet Ethan remained the same, still quiet, still focused on the work, as if the last battle had been just another mission. High Command sent formal invitations for Ethan to attend award ceremonies, to stand before cameras and be named a hero of the galaxy. He declined each one, politely but firmly. When Leah asked him why, he simply said, "The war's not over until the enemy stops fighting." He had no interest in medals or speeches. His focus was on making sure no more traps, no more massacres would happen again. Despite his refusal, his legend grew, not because of propaganda, but because of the stories told by those who had fought beside him. Pilots spoke of how he could read a battle like no one else. Gunners remembered the way his calm voice could steady shaking hands, and commanders admired how he could win without wasting lives. Both Allied and civilian, even in enemy space, his name carried weight. Craft captains used it as a warning to their crews, telling them that if they faced the executioner, they would not return. Some even abandoned posts rather than risk the fight. Whole sectors were abandoned without a single Allied shot being fired, just because of the possibility that Ethan might be there. Months passed, and the Craft Dominion finally sent a formal request for peace talks. They had lost too much, their fleets too broken to continue. The Allied Council agreed, and for the first time in years, the galaxy felt the edge of war begin to dull. The Peace Summit was held on a massive neutral station orbiting a quiet star. Representatives from every major race attended. Security was tighter than it had ever been, and still Ethan did not go. He stayed aboard the Starhawk, overseeing patrols while the diplomats signed treaties. His name was mentioned in speeches, but he refused to step into the spotlight. When the war officially ended, the Allied Council sent him a personal message, thanking him for his service and offering him a choice. He could retire with full honors and live anywhere he wanted, or continue serving in any role he chose. He chose to stay where he was, aboard the Starhawk, not because he loved war, but because he knew peace never lasted forever, and someone had to be ready. Leah sometimes wondered if he would ever allow himself to rest, if the man who had carried the weight of 12,000 confirmed kills could ever truly put down his weapon. She suspected he could not, but she also knew the galaxy was safer because of it. Years later, stories about Ethan Cole were still told in spaceports and military academies. Some true, some exaggerated. In the official histories, his name was listed among the greatest tacticians in recorded time. But in the quiet halls of the Starhawk, he was still just the man at the tactical station. Calm, watchful, ready. Those who served with him knew the truth, that when the humans' kill count was revealed, the galaxy feared him. But what they feared more was what would happen if he ever decided to stop fighting, because as long as Ethan Cole was out there, watching the stars, no enemy could be sure they were safe, and no ally ever had to feel alone in the dark.